Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. How should your sales and marketing teams work better today using the content your brand produces? Customers began consuming your content more frequently via digital channels like social, and then they leaned into it that much more during the pandemic. This created somewhat of a digital divide for sales teams, but quite often, marketing is doing a lot for sales and sales just doesn't know it. And marketing teams are often creating content that sales may not even be aware of, know where to find, or even when to use in the customer journey. And yet those silos, even with internal teams, can get taller. Marketing and sales have different functions, but we ultimately have the same goals, right? Ailey Judge is an executive marketing consultant, the global digital marketing manager at Hexagon Geosystems, and the co-founder and CMO of Content Monsta. And on this episode, we'll discuss sales and marketing, working together with content, sales enablement, aligning on goals, selling at a distance, digital asset management systems, breaking down silos, DJ Judgmental, Rihanna, the Georgia Aquarium, and a lot more. So let's tune into a Content Monsta with a monster of a shark, but you know, the good kind of monster, on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Lee, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Tell us a little bit about your journey, your background, your career to date.
Wow, the journey, that's a good question. So, I'll start my journey explanation with a story that a few years back I was at a table with other marketers, and turns out that almost none of us started as marketers. So that's my story as well. I've been marketing, but I wasn't a formal marketer.
I thought we were all born as brilliant marketers, and then we just evolved to where we were. Yeah.
That may be what happened. So I come from an entrepreneurial family. So, you know, having being within a family of businesses, then you're always thinking about how do we push this business forward. So marketing is something you're going to be doing anyway. I've had a business of my own since 10th grade. I began DJing in 10th grade and had a contract with the high school that I was in school with. So I've always had a business, and I've always taken my art to be something that's a business. I promised my mom that I would always be an artist, but I'd never be a starving artist. So I was a professional DJ up until about 3 years ago. Even though I've been a marketer for the past 20 years, I was always still DJing. I've toured, worldwide doing clubs and events and concerts with artists as a DJ, but it was always as a business. I had multiple mobile DJ units out there in the world. And so it was always a business. But, as those years of marketing my businesses came kind of at a crossroads, because I was always marketing the business. I was a computer geek, so I had built databases for my customers until I was once hired to this company and under a marketing position. And the first thing I did for them was build them a database for their customers. Had never heard the term CRM before, but I built over the course of 10 years. I built 4 CRMs for them. So I knew that world. Didn't know I knew SQL. I didn't know that I knew what a CRM was, although I'd built 3 using SQL. Um, had all these years of marketing. Only 5 or 6 at that point were formal. And then when I got to further in my career as a marketer, the same things kind of paralleled. I was being creative, creating content. Ended up being a marketing director for a company while still creating content. Also was their Salesforce administrator, and I was, marketing
Mhm.
automation. All these things were kind of going in parallel, but there was never a cohesiveness of it until the term digital marketing came along. And that's when I could combine the creative with the analytics part of it. And then the creative kind of took its own path, and I actually had other companies asking, "Can you create content for us as well?" And that was the launch of my company, Content Monster. So I'm still a marketer by profession. I'm a co-founder of Content Monster, which we create content for businesses. But I think what makes us unique is the Content Monster was designed from a person who was a marketer in a company with few marketers who needed to
Mhm.
create lots of content. And we were managed by a CEO who was a salesperson. So that was the foundation of me understanding that as a marketer, marketing has to make business sense. Content has to drive business. It's not just creative. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of where I came from. I came from a creative background that's analytical. All these things came together to form where I am today. Co-founder of a content marketing company and a digital marketer for other companies.
So, in all the times I've talked to you, I did not know about the DJ stint. So, what
Yeah.
was your DJ name? Was it DJ Monsta or
No,
DJ
Monster's not part
Judge?
of it. You know, it was so close. So as you mentioned earlier before we started recording, was that I've used every variation of my name that could be derived from my name.
Right.
Being a radio personality,
Yeah.
I've had several on-air names.
Mhm.
At one point, I was on a country station in the morning and an urban station in the afternoon. I went from Lee Alexander to Alex Lee. I went from Vince Gill to Johnny Gill in like 10 minutes.
Nice.
But the name that I actually toured under was Judge Mental because I have a minor in psychology. So my mom's history is psychology. So I've been around the psychology world for a long time. So that's where Judge Mental came from. So please don't Google it, but DJ Judge Mental is what I toured under.
So, what was the type of music that you typically played? Was it rave? Was it hip hop? Was it rock? Was it, and please don't say the word wedding kind of stuff, but I'm sure that came into
Hey,
play a little bit.
look, I'm a businessman. So
Yeah.
yes, I did do lots of
There you go.
weddings.
Well, so I know we talked a little bit beforehand, and we've even talked a little bit about this in Clubhouse, but I like your viewpoint really as somebody working at a place that's named after content, how
Mhm.
you're looking at content working well with sales and marketing today. Because as we look back at the pandemic, a lot of what has shifted because we couldn't travel and shake hands with everybody and see everybody in person. A lot of
Mhm.
that's changed, obviously towards the digital realm, including with the way we advertise or market. But
Yeah.
content's had a real impact in how marketing and sales work together today. So, how do you look at it?
Well, it's interesting. You know, if I go back 4 or 5 years before, well, obviously before the pandemic, it was a bit harder to convince sales that content mattered. It was harder to convince sales to sell remotely. It was hard to convince them of social selling, and
It was
that
hard to convince salespeople that marketing mattered a lot of times
exactly. And
because that's the way I used to see it on both sides.
yeah, and in some worlds, some companies, it still is. But you know, I realized about I'd say 3 years ago, I was doing some training at a sales kickoff, and the training was on social selling. And in that training, I showed the sales team how I had communicated and gotten regular feedback from our lead contact at our biggest client was responding to my content regularly, and I had a relationship that the salesperson who owned the account didn't have. So that was my way of proving, look, social matters, and social is your way. It could be your way in the door for new business. And the way she responded to social was the content that I was putting out that she responded to. So that was, you know, a foot in the door of showing how important content was and creating content that brings value to the person you want to sell to, other than just, you know, a commercial that they're gonna turn off. So yes, today convincing sales of social selling, of content marketing is a bit easier because marketers by nature have been, so to speak, selling from a distance. That's just part of what we do. We've been doing that the whole time. And then the past year, sales has had to learn how to sell from a distance. And they're realizing that all this content that marketing has created for them, you know, from white papers to videos to live events, all of this marketing stuff for a while there was all they had to connect with their customers. No more getting on the plane to fly to hand them a business card. You know, it was more of a here's some content. And in fact, last spring there was a lot of I saw a lot of marketers getting really stressed because all of a sudden the attention was turned to them by saying people saying, hey, marketing, what do you have for us? You know, what
Yeah.
can we
Yeah.
send these clients? You know, I can't get on this plane this week, but this client has to know about this new feature or this new offering or this new product launch. We have to launch this product and we can't be there for this trade show. How do we do this? All of a sudden digital marketers became, you know, got put into the spotlight, and that's of course because of the pandemic. And so hopefully now that the eyes have been opened, marketers can remain in the spotlight and remain as an obvious part of the selling process.
How do you think that type of content, though, has changed for, say, near to long term? Because the kind of content that a marketer would enjoy
Mhm,
versus the kind of content the salesperson would enjoy sending their client
mhm.
doesn't always match. And if you're an entrepreneur or small to medium sized business of any type, it can't be the consultant fluffy type content that a lot of people come
Right.
up with, but it also doesn't necessarily have to be all sales tactic only type things to convert with one touch. I mean, either. But how do you look at the kind of content that you create, or at least advise people on, as to where it touches the right mix for the right type of person?
Well, there's a couple dimensions to that. So even before pandemic, there was a case of, and where I don't think we were very well in tune to, which was getting the right kind of content to the person at the right time. Now, doesn't just apply to the customer's journey when I say right time, it also applies to the company's journey. Like you mentioned earlier, about if you're a new company, you may not have a whole year for your blog to take off and get some SEO juice to sell business, right? So look at it with both dimensions. From a customer standpoint, it's better documented. You know, you want to have certain content for the top of the funnel, certain content for the middle of the funnel, certain content for the bottom of the funnel. This we know about. So to take that, and you also have to divide that also by what persona is getting that content at each one of those stages. So I often speak about dividing your content strategy in two directions. One, across the personas, and then two, up and down the funnel. That's customer focus. That's customer centric. But also, as you mentioned, every company, if you want to create content, you have to figure out when this content will actually show us ROI. And, often you hear content creators, we preach about content, but we have to consider who we're talking to, where their business is, how mature their business, their product, all those things are, because that makes a difference. I can't tell someone, hey, you need a talking head corporate video if they are in a crunch to make sales, because that kind of thought leadership may not drive day one sales. They may be better off doing something that's a little faster, humorous, less polished, and direct to the person who needs to hear about it. If you're talking video, get that video on Facebook or on Instagram in front of that person who needs to buy it right then, and build that brand. And also at the same time, build that confidence that, hey, I'm talking about my brand, but at the same time, by the way, you can buy it right now if you want to, without saying that. You don't say it, but you say, here's this shiny new object, and I just happen to have it, and it did this for me, without selling it. That can get you closer to the fast sale. And then in terms of the long term, that stuff can be repurposed and used for the long term. So you got to consider who you're talking to when you're talking about content marketing, because I understand that content marketing, we all know it's the long game, but there are some immediate needs, and so you have to know how to apply it.
Yeah, 6 months is a lifetime. If you wait
Yeah.
on Google to crawl, for example, through your content, I mean, you could go broke pretty quickly. So, what's a typical size client that you work with? Who are the typical people that approach you to create content, or help them enable them to create content?
Well, it's interesting because the size of the client is almost irrelevant. It's more for us the size of the marketing department. Okay, because I came from and created the company based on how do I help people who were where I was at. I was a marketer of in a team of 1 to 5. The
Mhm.
company had sizable contracts, and so the budget was there, but the manpower was low. And you want to create larger kinds of content, like I call it big content, podcasts and videos. You want to create content that has high ROI, that can last you throughout the year. You want to do all that, but you have a small staff. So our target isn't so much the size of the company, because we have large companies with small marketing teams, we have small companies with small marketing teams, but our sweet spot is those small or underskilled marketing teams. And when I say underskilled, I mean I wouldn't expect there to be an audio expert on a marketing team, right? So that's not a skill you would expect to see on a marketing person's resume. You might see video nowadays, but you wouldn't see audio. So those are the kind of things, the kind of targets we have, is for marketing departments who need to create a lot of content, who need to generate a lot of attention, a lot of brand recognition, but may not have a big enough team to do all that.
So you just mentioned the richer kinds of content, audio and video type stuff. And I know you produce other kinds of content as well, but when are people generally coming to you and saying this is the kind of richer content, if you will, that's more robust and more technically complex to produce than, say,
Mhm.
writing 50 blogs and, posting a bunch of pictures on Instagram, for example?
I think there's probably two entry points of that. I mean, one is when they realize that big content can create lots of other content. I mean, if you get, in fact, we have a scenario that I actually was at Bright Cove a couple years ago. I showed a case study where we had a client who we filmed 5 talking head videos. So we found their in-house subject matter experts. We talked to them. Each interview was probably about maybe 30 minutes. From that 30 minutes, we had about 15 minutes worth of content from that interview, which is basically 5 15-minute videos from each, I mean, 5 5-minute videos from each person. Three, my math's off. Three 5-minute videos from each person. Um, so we have all these catalog now. We have 5 people times three, all these little videos, right? Those videos, first of all, were also chopped up into smaller videos for social. So they had dozens, if not hundreds, of social posts. We combined that information into blog articles, combined more information into white papers. And so the content just kept going, and in fact, they just, saw recently, this has been about 2 years now, added more of those videos to their website.
Mhm.
So 2 years later, they're still benefiting from what, from a production standpoint, was one afternoon of filming, right? We went in there, small crew, had 5 subject matter experts in one afternoon. 2 3 years later, they're still generating content from that. So, once you realize that, then
Mhm.
you've solved some of your blogging problems. You've solved some of your social problems. You solve so much from just one, we call it a media day or a video day. We go in, do a video day, and they benefit for years to come. I've
Yeah.
got my own case study, but same thing. I did the same thing with the video. That video became a podcast topic, which we talked about again. It became a white paper. It became an ebook, and it became a lead magnet. And I'm still getting leads from what was a podcast and a video from 2 3 years ago.
Yeah, as long as you've got not a quarantine, but you've got a good haircut and you're not recording at less than 720, that can be some pretty robust evergreen content, that looks good and sounds good today, or 2 years from now.
It's funny you mentioned that. Whenever I do get a haircut, which is my own right now, please don't look.
Yeah.
I go, you know what? I better batch some videos today.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, how does sales know where and when to pick up the football, if you will, with the
Yeah,
kind of content that a company like yours or anybody else's may produce with that's a more robust and rich piece?
yeah,
Another thing to keep in mind is they might be working with other content shops that
yeah.
write blogs for them specifically, or maybe someone else does podcasting only or whatever it is. It may be that there's a lot of these different pieces. So trying to figure out where the right producer of content with the right content piece fits
Yeah.
into the sales puzzle that can
Okay.
be communicated back by the marketing team can be a struggle.
Here's the key point on that. So, and this is a job for marketing. Um, Whether or not you have, and now the ideal situation is for you to have what's called a digital asset management platform, something where you can store all your
Damn
content
right.
with metadata.
Mhm.
Okay, so you can say, okay, let's call this. We'll have a video and we'll tag it top of funnel, product A, vice presidents. Right. So now if a salesperson has to go pitch to a vice president, top of funnel on product A, he can type that data in, boom, here are all my videos I need for my presentation today. He can put together his sales pitch really easily with all that content. It could be some white paper with vital research from a year ago, if it's tagged correctly. Now, that's the ideal situation where a company actually has a digital asset management platform. If they don't, still, I mean, if it's as simple as folders, folders somewhere labeled top, middle, bottom of funnel. Um, and the key thing is no matter how you catalog it, communicate with sales often. If there's a new piece of content, let them know you have it, first of all. Second of all, catalog it so they can find it later on. And then also remind them often that, by the way, we have stats from Gartner or from Forrester on this topic. Or This campaign just went out. Here's the content that we've created over the past year that supports this with data and with video and with blog articles. It's really key to keep sales in the loop and remind them often of the content that you have. Otherwise, your efforts can go to waste too, no matter how good your marketing is.
Yeah, I was going to say amen about the digital asset, but I'll just say damn right.
Yeah.
And I know,
Good one.
yeah, Dropbox unfortunately has been the solution for a lot of folks, or a Google Doc, but I wish more companies had a digital asset manager. So are you seeing today, at least with teams you work with, that sales enablement as a whole, or that sales marketing conversation is happening better today than it did pre-pandemic? Because I know the topic that we talked about when we were on Clubhouses is sales finally snuggling up to marketing.
Yeah.
They're leaning on them, yes, more for different content pieces. But when we come out of this,
Will it go back?
and again, a crystal ball I do not have, but I'm very curious as to what your opinion is on the future of how the marketing team, especially the digital marketing team, supports sales folks going forward.
I think coming out of the pandemic, that sales will be a lot more marketing aware. If marketing has stepped up to the plate like they have been asked to do over the past
Mhm.
year, then they had a grand chance to display their value to sales.
Mhm.
And so coming out of the pandemic, they should find out that sales is much more marketing aware. Sales should be more aware of what content marketing has, what ability marketing has to engage with their customers. I think over the past year, sales has been able to and been required to dig a little bit deeper into what is marketing doing for us. And often marketing is doing a lot for you, but you don't know about it.
Mhm.
So now they go, oh, wow, you mean marketing can tell me where my prospect went on the website? Marketing can tell me what content they consumed. Marketing tell me what video, what white paper. Marketing can give me a score of how engaged this person is. I didn't even know that. That happened in this past year, I guarantee, for lots of companies where sales didn't even realize how much intelligence and data marketing had on the very people they're going to meet with.
Yeah, such a great point. So you as a now an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
and you talked about realizing later that you're a marketer and you've worn many hats, but when you sort of take your own look at yourself in the mirror with everything, how do you view sales supporting marketing and marketing supporting sales? So when you look at content that produces, whether it's leads or sales or long-term customers, how do you look at that through that kind of prism?
Well, I think where we're heading towards, and we've probably always been heading this way, and digital and the pandemic also has pushed us further in this direction, is that we're going to find that marketing and sales are just two skill sets of the same job, right? So long it's been silos. We talk about sales versus marketing, or what has sales done? Has sales generated any business? Has marketing generated any business? Is there any ROI in our marketing efforts? Well, we know that we all have the same goal, which is new business. And we know that there's a definite skill set in selling that people can get, they're professionals at selling. They're good at what they do in selling. And there's a skill set that's definitely selling. There's also a skill set that's definitely marketing. Marketers know marketing, sales know sales. But we're heading to a place where the gray area between the two is getting much wider. And as that gray area between marketing and sales, as those skills start being the gap, not the gap, but the gray area of those two molded things together get bigger, you're going to find that those salespeople who don't understand marketing are going to fall off. Those marketers who don't understand sales are going to fall off. And eventually, you're going to have uh, one skill set or one job title, and it's going to require you to understand both sales and marketing.
And I love that specifically because where marketers have needed to do better is understanding their customer. That's something that sales often has the luxury of being more connected.
Hmm.
Now, that means there are a lot of the salespeople I know that I got probably more, I'll say, confident, not arrogant, in my sales abilities than my marketing abilities when I was carrying a bag at the time. But in marketing, you have the luxury of shaping the narrative, but you don't have the capability most of the times of having a direct conversation with customers, and
Yeah.
looking at social metrics or how something performed with a vanity metric is not the same thing.
Hmm.
And if it'll force people to get more connected to their customer, they can still do all the wonderful fluffy content. I'm a massive fan of doing that kind of content as
Hmm.
long as it helps perform.
Well, think about this though. When you have a salesperson, one of the biggest advantages of being a salesperson was that got to actually be face to face with the customer. You got to
Exactly.
talk with them. You got to hear the language that they speak, the way they express their pains and their needs for what they want to solve or for they want to buy.
And not
Well,
just read it or listen to it through a social platform or read an NPS survey.
right now, what we just said was through the lens of pre-pandemic. Right? Because when we took away the ability for the salesperson to be the first person to provide the information, then it falls back on marketing. Not to mention, we all have heard the statistics over the past years of how many, and the numbers always growing, how many times a person will, how long they'll do their research before they're even interested in talking to sales, right? So if you combine this whole, the seven touch stat you've heard before, right?
Mhm.
Combine that with the fact that people research before they talk to sales, that means that they're already about ready. They've already decided to purchase a solution before they talk to the salesperson. From there, it's just a matter of which solution to purchase. They've already researched. At one point in time, a buyer gained their information from the salesperson. And that salesperson's part of their job was to know all the information about their product and to know how to express that to their customer in a way that persuaded them to purchase. But that superpower has been taken away from them now because the buyer will do this on their own. So where does that leave the salesperson but to understand what marketing is doing more, so they don't walk into the door, have that first touch with their person they're trying to sell to, not realizing that this person could be asking them questions that they know the answer to already. They just want to see if the salesperson can help them understand it better. We've probably all seen cases where the customers are more educated than the salesperson. The customer's gone through so much content, watched so many videos, the sales may not have even seen themselves. So you definitely want to avoid that scenario.
So when you think of the types of content that perform, whether it's for you or for your clients, especially with making one a human connection, but
Hmm.
also taking that to where it converts, whether it's through leads, sales, creating a long-term customer, keeping them longer, what is the kind of content that you've seen resonate the best for you with you and your clients?
It's hard to say. And I'd like to spout statistics, but it changes over time and over
Sure.
platform, right? So one kind of content may
Well,
work
then
better
as
on
a
one
follow-up
platform than
to
another.
that, how do you also measure that
Hmm.
performance as it evolves?
Yeah. So for my company, right, not those who I work with, but for my company, video has been the leader. Um, so even when it comes to other kinds of content, in fact, there was a stat I read yesterday from my friend Andy Crestadina, who said that, you know, when he puts video inside a blog article, the blog article gets 4 times as much time spent on page to read that article because they're watching videos. Um, my initial client base was built off of LinkedIn video.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's going to be a minute before I can, from a ROI standpoint, say that any other type of content has worked better for Content Monster than video. We do blogs. We do get traffic from blogs. In fact, some of our videos came from blogs that were first blogs, and we repurposed as videos, and vice versa. Um, and we do get a lot of traffic to our website from blogs. Um, but I still say the video for us is the leader.
Yeah. Well, Lee, you live in Atlanta. Been there about a million times. I'd love to know, what do you do for fun, especially there? They have an amazing aquarium, one of the best.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things where you visit when your friends come to visit town.
Exactly.
You don't go while you're here. You go when people come to visit. Um, Atlanta is doing a very good job at building outdoor spaces. The Atlanta Beltline is where they're taking the old railroad track around the city
Mhm.
and turning it into wide walk spaces.
Mhm.
Um, and so for me, getting out in terms of the city, I live in the suburbs. When I go to enjoy Atlanta, it's almost always the Beltline and the parks because Atlanta does a very good job of, we're this city in the trees. It's still country. When my mom comes to visit me from the country, she's like, I can't believe this city is so country. And you could drive 5 minutes in one direction and you'd be by a farm. So I love Atlanta's open spaces. I love what they've done in the city to create open spaces. You can go to Piedmont Park and you think you're in the woods somewhere. So that's what I love about Atlanta. That's what I do.
Well, 5-minute drive anywhere around the perimeter only takes you about a block because it takes you an hour to get anywhere in Atlanta.
That's
So
possible. Yeah.
I like the aquarium because you can also dive with sharks. You can actually
See, that's your
swim
thing.
with the
Yeah.
whale sharks there.
Have you dived there yet?
Yeah, I'll dive anywhere I can if when I'm in Atlanta.
So you've done the aquarium. You've
Yeah.
dived there.
Oh, I've been to the
Oh, awesome.
aquarium. I don't know how many times and done that. So, but I don't do it that often. I'm not a big fan of keeping sharks in aquariums,
Uh,
but the Atlanta Aquarium has done a pretty good job. It's hard to keep sharks in captivity.
mm,
With large sharks, you can keep a lot of like sand tiger sharks. They actually fare well in captivity, but most sharks that are larger sharks do not. So, Lee, what is your favorite kind of shark and why? A question you won't get asked anywhere else.
um, wow. So the first thing that came to mind was, is this considered a shark? Are stingrays in the shark family or no?
They're cousins. They're not
Okay.
sharks.
Okay. So no cousins. 'Cause I was going to say that. Because I have swam with them before.
Yes.
Never swam with a shark, but I swam with stingrays. I've actually put hands on stingrays, but never sharks. So I would say probably the whale shark, just because I've seen it so much and read more about it because of the Georgia Aquarium.
There you go. That's not a bad. They're fantastic to dive with out in the wild as well.
And they're
But
huge.
they're
Hmm.
massive, largest fish in the world. You still got whales that are bigger, but as far as fish, whales are not fish; they're mammals. But the largest fish in the world is a whale shark.
And despite
So
their size, they seem a lot less scarier.
yeah, exactly. So Lee, it's a special time in the show. You're ready for the 5 most interesting, important questions you're going to be asked today.
Not ready, but I'll do it.
All right, this is a good content Monsta question.
All right, let's go.
Dracula or Frankenstein?
Dracula.
Okay. Number 2, outdoors or indoors kind of question. Depends on how you look at it. Atlanta Braves or Atlanta Falcons?
Falcons.
Yeah. And, it's just not ever going to, that new stadium's just not the same. It's fantastic, but it's not the same. All
You
right.
mean the Falcon Stadium or the
No,
or
the
the
Brave
Braves?
Stadium.
Well, I just don't like being out in the sun too much. I've
Gotcha.
half of the game you're going to be burning up, no matter where you sit.
Number 3. This is actually got a little bit of I'll edit this part out, but it's got a little bit of a significance because of today. Rihanna or Beyonce?
Beyonce.
So I would disagree because Rihanna says she's got a Monsta lying under her bed.
She does get points. She does get points for that one. Does get points for that one.
All right, number 4, ring light or softbox?
Softbox.
Agreed. Number 5, and I wish they sell those more in stores instead of just getting them through Amazon or a photography shop. Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread? I'm
Cornbread.
asking a man of the South, so I got to have a good answer.
Cornbread all day.
Really?
Whether it's a muffin or a hush puppy. Cornbread.
Not bad. Not bad.
You asked the right question to somebody who actually not only knows his answer of cornbread, but different types. I could
Oh,
be
absolutely.
the Bubba Gump of cornbread. Muffins, muffin cornbread, hush puppy cornbread, griddle
Nice.
cakes.
Nice. Lee, where can people find out more about you, get in touch with you, hear you speak, learn more about the company and more?
Well, get in touch with me. LinkedIn's my favorite place to hang out socially is on LinkedIn. And then my 2 websites are, of course, the company, Content Monsta, monsta.com. And then my personal site, aleejudge.com.
Perfect. Lee, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Good talking to you. Thanks.
So there was my conversation with A. Lee Judge, an executive marketing consultant, the global digital marketing manager at Hexagon Geosystems, and the co-founder and CMO of Content Monsta. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, such a good point that salespeople should consider. Your clients may be engaging with your content in a way that sales cannot. Marketers have been selling from a distance via content and channels like social. It's made sales have to create a distance, if you will. Your customers went to digital more just like everyone else, and so regardless of phone calls and or in-person visits, remember to consider that shift and lean into your marketing teams more. Second, big content can create lots of other types of content. That was one of my favorite comments. This is something I do often. Take a 30-minute interview via Zoom with someone like Lee. I can cut that into, say, 10 3-minute snippets, transcribe it, put it out there for Google to crawl as a blog. I can take the audio for a podcast, take screenshots for social or even ads to promote on social channels or banner display ads. There's so much you can do with larger pieces of content. And then break it apart again and reuse it, as opposed to having an internal team produce A, another internal team produce B, an external agency produce C, and then yet another external agency produce D. Historically, we've used bigger agencies to often produce that bigger creative that everyone uses and breaks apart. But this will help you with more of your content in order to make sure where and when your content is being used by sales teams the right way as well. Third, it's important for any marketing team to organize and catalog your assets and communicate those better with sales teams or any teams. It doesn't matter what size company you have. It just begins with organization. And that's why DAM systems have become popular and are better than random folders, Dropbox, Google Docs, etc. It may be easy for you to find, but not necessarily for a sales team that works with you to know where it is and have guidance of where and when to use those assets, or understand really where the customer is in that journey. As we discussed coming out of the pandemic, sales folks should be more marketing aware, what content they have, what to use to engage with customers, and marketers should take this opportunity to help someone use it. You want people to like and share your content, and that starts often with your sales teams. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I'm so thankful for everybody who listens. Today's going to be an amazing day for you. That's my hope anyway, but much of that is up to you. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.